Welcome to Recovery Rockstars Uncut, uniting the recovery community with raw and real stories. Your host, Kevin Z, puts the light on people and brands that are rocking the recovery lifestyle. So you want to be a rock superstar? RecoveryRockstars.com. Now, here's Kevin.
All right, guys, what's up? Welcome to Recovery Rockstars Uncut. I'm your host, Kevin Z, and I am super pumped right now because you guys are going to be inspired. I got my boy Earle on. Earle, what's going on?
What's going on, buddy?
Earle and we actually hooked up a couple weeks ago, and for those of you guys who follow me on Instagram, Earle is the dude that I promoted in my stories, ex-heroin addict, and tried to get clean 50 times. Is that correct, Earle?
Yes, sir.
Let's get into it, man. Take me to the beginning. How did it all start?
So with me, man, it started, I was the youngest kid in my neighborhood. So when I was about 12 years old, all of the kids in the neighborhood were 15, 16 years old. So they're already in high school. They're getting their driver's license. And, I'm looking up to all of them.
Nice.
And I remember the first time that I was ever under the influence of anything was a kid in the front of the neighborhood. Had his license, was walking around. He had a big system in the back, loudspeakers, big TV screen head unit, and one of them old Crown Vics, rims on it and everything. So we're walking around, me and my friends, and he's like, "Hey, you guys want to smoke a blunt?" And I was like, "I guess." I'm 12 years old. I didn't know. So I just liked that he had this car and that the system was loud. That's what I was drawn to. So we get in the car. He's got the system so loud that when I got out, I couldn't hear. And he, rolls this blunt up and we smoke it. And I had a lot of trauma growing up in my life. My stepfather was abusive. I didn't see my dad very often. My family was all drug addicts except for my mom. And, I was still at that point, wasn't getting into anything. But once I smoked that blunt, I went home and I looked at myself in the mirror. And I distinctively remember this like it was yesterday. Smoked the blunt, went home, went in my room. I was afraid my mom would know. I looked at myself in the mirror in my bedroom, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to do this as often as I possibly can because I felt amazing. I just felt like all of the things that had happened to me growing up just kind of went away, and literally from that moment on, I was hooked like that.
Well, first of all, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
Delaware.
Okay, so being 12. You felt like a pretty badass hopping in a dude's car who's got a booming system. I remember when I was young, I always wanted a booming system. So hopping in the car, you're feeling badass. You hit a blunt for the first time. You felt at ease. You felt comfortable. It relinquished all your thoughts of everything that happened to you in the past. And you said, shit, game on. What happened after that, man?
So 13 years old, man. As a matter of fact, after that, my little brother was born not long after. For the baby shower, my mom got a bunch of envelopes with cash in it. I was actually getting into my mom's purse already and taking money to buy weed with, and started getting into more trouble with the weed. And then at 13 years old, I had moved in with my grandmother. Now, like I said, my whole family is all drug addicts except for maybe one aunt, two uncles, and my mom, and that's it.
Was your dad around?
I moved in with my grandmother. She was letting me drink.
Was your dad around?
Me and my dad were never close. When I was really young, I went there on the weekends. But then once I turned 10, I just stopped going, and I just kind of lived with my mom.
Got it.
So my dad's side of the family wasn't around too often. I kind of was with my mom's side of the family. So my grandmother, I moved in with her at 13, and I'm living with her for a couple months at this point. She let me smoke cigarettes. She let me smoke weed. She let me drink. She let me do whatever I want. Well, one night I got drunk. Was fighting with my cousin, and every time I drank, I got violent. So my grandma, I go back inside, and she gives me a line of cocaine to try to counteract the effects of the alcohol. So the first time I did a drug besides weed was cocaine, and it was with my grandmother at 13. So now I'm I just remember it going up to another level, and now I'm every weekend now I'm doing blow with my grandmother.
That's insane. Okay, I've never heard a story like that before.
No. Most people have it.
So then you are hanging out with your grandma, you're partying, you're doing blow. Fuck, where do you go from there? I mean,
I know. So I started to get into a lot of trouble because I started to hang out with my mom's side of the family more and more and more. My mom was trying to shelter me from them growing up. So now that I'm old enough, I start going back to them, like wanting to hang out with that side of the family because they're all covered in tattoos from head to toe and in and out of jail and drugs. And I just was always infatuated by that. So I started hanging out with them at age 15. I'm at this point, I've been arrested a lot of times for underage drinking and menacing and just little misdemeanor charges. And my mom had to go to court with me one day. When we go to court, the prosecutor tells my mom, "Hey, if you do something with him, we'll drop these charges. We don't want to see nothing happen to him." And I was like, oh, yeah, which I didn't know nothing about. So one morning, my mom wakes me up with her husband at the time, and they put me on a plane to Missouri. So I'm under the impression I'm going to a boarding school. Come to find out, I end up in a boot camp. So I'm in this boot camp, and it ends up being like pretty much like a child torture ring. So I stay there for about 8 months, which was probably the worst 8 months of my entire life. I was abused in every sense of the word abuse. It was horrible. A kid died there. Kids were getting their arms and legs broken all the time. Thank God the place is now shut down. But
what was it called? Where was it?
It was in Kidder, Missouri. It was called Thayer Learning Center, TLC Boot Camp.
Got it. Okay.
So I come home from there, and when I get home, I have PTSD now because I have just been tortured for 8 months.
Had you seen your family when you were there for the 8 months?
No. So we weren't allowed to no phone calls, and we could only write a letter once every 2 weeks. But they read the letter before they send it out. So if we ever said anything about what was going on, they wouldn't send it, or I guess they would scratch it out.
So you went through that horrific experience. You hadn't even talked to your family, your mom, and then what was going through your head when you first came home? I mean, I'm sure you were just fucking angry at the world.
Yeah. So when I came home, I was really confused. I was having a hard time sleeping because, like, they used to wake us up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes with air horns. And mind you, I'm 15, so I'm in 18 to 20 of us, and it's in a dungeon. So it's not like there's no beds or nothing. It's just a concrete floor with sleeping bags.
Wow.
So it's like 18 kids sleeping on this floor. They come in with air horns, and just like the constant fear, 8 months living in constant fear at 15. When I came home, I couldn't sleep. And when I did lay down, I would sleep with my shoes on in case in my mind, I thought maybe they're going to try to come back and get me and send me back to this boot camp. So like, I was really mad at the world, and I started to, before that, I just drank because I liked it. And after that, I needed to do something because my anxiety was so high. And I was so mad at the world that like the only way I could cope with it was to try to drown it out.
So the plan to take you to essentially boot camp completely backfired. It made things worse.
It went backwards.
Yeah.
Right.
So when you got back, you just got back to it. So did you get right back into hanging out, drinking, cocaine?
So when I came home, I found out that my grandmother, who I had been partying with, had been diagnosed with cancer. Oh. But nobody told me while I was in there because they were afraid if they did, I would go off because I was kind of known at that age for a very explosive temper. So nobody told me. I come home, I find that out. And like I said, I was so afraid to go back that I waited probably 9 months or so before I started doing anything again. I was afraid to even smoke a cigarette. I remember anytime I would have to put winter gloves on so my hands wouldn't smell like cigarette smoke. So like I didn't touch anything about 9 months or so.
Wow. So when was your introduction to heroin?
So right around 17, I got into the pills, Percocet, Oxycontins, all of them, and I did them for a couple years. And once they kind of went away, I had met a girl, and this girl, I don't know why I was infatuated with her because, she was injecting heroin and like I was on pills. And one day she just kind of said to me, "Hey, we can shoot these pills instead of sniffing them." And she had already been doing it for a while. And I was like, "Look, I don't really do the needle thing. Like I don't, da-da-da." And then I guess, we decided, I decided let's give it a try. And when I did, things escalated immediately and horribly.
So the first time you did it, you were immediately hooked.
Oh my God, yes.
And you said that was at 17?
That was probably, 17 is when I got into the pills. This was probably at like 21, something like that, 20, 21.
And how long did that journey as a heroin addict last? So your first shot, 21, you tried to get clean 50 times. I mean, take me through that.
Okay, so the first time I went to rehab was at 17. I had went to a place in New Jersey for underage, you know what I mean, like underage. Then when I came home, I got really bad on Xanax. And every time I took Xanax, I would explode. I would go crazy. And I started to get sent to these psych wards all the time. So like I would go to Meadowood, Rockford, all of these, psych wards in Delaware. I've been to the one 11 times. I've been to the other one 8 times. And then not long after I started injecting heroin, I started to go to detox, like maybe once every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, because my addiction would get so out of control so fast that like I would find myself every time with nothing, with nowhere to go, with no money, and I would say, okay, I got to do this. I got to get clean. This just ruined my life. Go to detox, come out, and then within an hour I'd be right back at it. And I got stuck in that cycle for years and years and years of just trying and failing miserably every time.
Where was your mom in all this?
So like my mom, she was always by my side, but like the problem is that like my mom wasn't going to let me get high, and so I tried to stay away from her. Obviously, you know what I mean. Like I wanted to. So like I would call my mom and say, "Mom, I'm not doing good. I really need help," and she would come and pick me up, and she enabled me for a little bit. She started to get involved in Nar-Anon, and when she did, she kind of learned about what she was doing as far as enabling goes. And like I said, my whole family was addicts, so I would just go live with them. I would just go live with my addict family, and they let me do whatever I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Was your family doing heroin too?
Yes.
Okay. So there was essentially no escape. I mean, it was just a vicious cycle. Vicious cycle.
Yes.
So how did it end?
So my mom's brother, who was probably the closest uncle to me. All the other uncles were second uncles, so they were my grandparents' brothers. Mm-hmm. My mom's brother, I started using with him around same time as my grandmother, and he was kind of like my dad essentially. He taught me how to get my hair cut, he taught me how to dress, he sold drugs, so he had a nice car. He was pretty much my role model as well, and he died. He overdosed, and my mom is the one that found him, so he didn't answer his phone. She went to his house, she threw a rock through the window, climbed through, and found him in bed. He had been there for about 2.5 days dead. So rewind 2 weeks before she finds him dead, she finds me laying on her bathroom floor in her basement, choking on vomit, minutes away from being brain dead. And that was like the first severe overdose that I had to where like I didn't just fall out and come back. Like I was minutes away from death. And my mom was asleep. She said that she just popped up, knew something was wrong, ran downstairs and found me laying on her bathroom floor, choking on throw up.
Oh my God.
So then 2 weeks later, my uncle dies. And when my uncle died, it was kind of just like, what's going on right now? Like, I almost just died. My uncle's dead. What do I do? So me and my mom started making phone calls to every place that we could. She starts calling just literally anybody. We don't know these people. We're just looking stuff up on Google, and we finally get a hold of a place, and they say, we might have a scholarship. They call back a couple of days later and say, we can get them a scholarship to either a place in Florida or California. And then when we found out I'd be going to Florida, I had to wait about 5 days. Them 5 days were horrible. I went to Florida, and it completely changed my entire life. Like, that changed my life without a doubt, going to Florida and getting actually 3 months of treatment, not 5 days, not 14 days, but 3 months.
The 3 months of treatment, I want to hear about those 5 days, though, that you were waiting. What was that like? You said it was horrible. Did you lock yourself in a house? Was your mom right there with you? I mean, those had to be 5 days, seemed like eternity.
No, I ran the streets for 5 days straight.
Really?
They had tried to keep me in. They tried to keep me in the house, but what I did was I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything, so I started, and in my mind, I'm thinking, I know I'm going away for 3 months, so I just start robbing drug dealers.
Oh, wow.
Because they're not going to be able to come get me afterwards, and they're not going to call the police. So I just kind of went on this drug dealer robbing spree where, like, I would call them and say, can you meet, and then I would snatch it and take off. I was telling, like, people who, like, I knew bought drugs that I had drugs. And then when I got the money, say, I got to run next door and get it and take off. I just was like, I was completely out of my mind and them 5 days. Like, that's where I was in my life, where, like, robbing friends of mine was just okay with me right there,
Yeah. Take me through the treatment process. You were there for 3 months.
3 months, yeah. So I arrived. I don't remember going. I don't remember getting on the plane. I don't remember getting off. I just woke up in Florida. And when I woke up, I couldn't remember if they had sent me to Florida or California. I just couldn't because it was such a blur before.
Yeah.
So I wake up, I'm coming off alcohol, Xanax, heroin, cocaine, and like I'm having a full-fledged anxiety attack. I'm hungover and I'm through opiate withdrawal. So I'm trying to figure it out. I walk out, I've talked to the nurse. I say, can I have a detox med? What's going on? And she said, well, when you got here, you couldn't talk to the doctor. So the doctor couldn't prescribe you anything, and that was a Friday, so I had to wait until Monday for the doctor to come back to get my detox meds.
Wow.
So for about 2.5 days, 3 days, I laid on the shower floor, and I cried and I prayed for really the first time where I sincerely prayed in my life, because I was in the worst amount of pain I have ever been in my entire life. And I don't even know what I was praying to at the time. I just prayed and said, like, I don't know how I got here. I don't know what's happened in my life to get me here, but please get me out of here. I will do anything, not out of the rehab, but out of this hell that I'm living in. And when a couple days, 5-6 days went by and I was on the taper, I started to feel better. And then before I knew it, man, like I started to become excited about recovery. After I got off my blackout, I started going to the gym next door. I got a sponsor. I got a job. I got like assigned to where when new people came in, they had to stay with me for their first week for me to show them the ropes. So I was helping people out. And like around day 30, 45, man, like I was feeling really excited to the point where like I was on fire for recovery. And I've been that way ever since. I was receiving trauma therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, one-on-one counseling, physical exercise, pretty much reprogrammed. You know what I mean? That's what it was that changed it for me. All the other rehabs that were state run, I had only had, 7 to 14 days, but they were so overcrowded and so understaffed that like I'd be lucky if I even met my counselor by the time I left, let alone all this therapy, and that what kind of changed it for me.
That's unreal. And then what happened when you left? Because I watch your videos and I'm listening to you and I'm envisioning you laying in a shower, just absolutely desperate and confused and don't know whether you want to live or die and not know where you are. And then I'm just staring at you right now and I'm watching these videos and, somebody who's in it, they think that there's absolutely no getting out of it. And I can't even tell you how many parents will send me direct messages saying, oh, you know what, my daughter's a heroin addict, she's in jail. Your stories are giving me a hope. And that's exactly what you're doing, man. I mean, keep preaching. But, like, what happened when you got out? You left. Did you go back to Delaware?
Yes. So I left Florida, flew into Philadelphia. Philadelphia's only about 30 minutes away. And I got really lucky that there's a nonprofit in Delaware called Attack Addiction. And they do a bunch of stuff in Delaware. They do all kinds of different events and stuff. So I went from the Philadelphia airport directly to Attack Addiction meeting, and they're only once a month, so the dates lined up perfect. Second Tuesday of the month, actually. So I go there, and my mom had already been volunteering there for a little while, like doing advocacy work. So I signed up for like 3 events, like a baseball game, a block party in the city, and something else. And like at 90 days, like I still wasn't obviously all the way back yet. Like I was still having a hard time sleeping. My mind was still up and down. I had but for the first time I said, okay, I know I've been through this. I know it's going to take a while. And I was willing to wait because I knew I was going to die. So I was willing to wait for it to get better. Everybody kept telling me it'll get greater later. And I just said, okay, listen, I'm going to trust you on this. And like, it better get greater later. I'm going to be mad. And then it did, and it's like amazing looking back throughout all my life when people would tell me that, I'd be like, you're crazy. It's never going to get better. And then it does. So I signed up for these events, man, and I start going to like these baseball games, and I have a little table, all the Attack Addiction pamphlets, and I had little drunk goggles to let the kids wear so they could see what it was like to be drunk. And I'm just talking, and like, man, like when I left the first one, like I was floating.
Yeah,
like I was literally floating when I walked out of there.
Yeah,
and that saved my life. Like outreach and talking to people and just getting involved was the key that I had been missing for such a long time.
Do you feel like you found your purpose?
For sure. Like since that, my life has been 100% revolves around recovery and addiction in some form or another, like every aspect of it.
What is your favorite thing about life right now?
Waking up not sick every day.
Love it.
Now being, that's that for that aspect of it, but just being, one thing's good is not being known as the addict, or being known as being strung out, and being known as somebody who is sober. It's like people see me like in my neighborhood that hated me for 10, 15 years, and they're like, hey, can you help my son? This was somebody who wouldn't even let their son hang around me. And it's just like watching these people go through that process that I went through. It's beautiful.
That's absolutely amazing. So what's on tap for you? What's the near future hold? And how can this community help? Because that's one thing that, we endlessly promote here is just helping each other out.
So I'm about to leave now when we're done this for Virginia, which is about 4 hours from me. I'm speaking at a prison tomorrow in Virginia. So that's the immediate future. As far as a bigger scope of things, we have the nonprofit Hope on deck. We are building a bigger donation warehouse where we can keep all the donations. We travel around the entire country handing it out to the homeless and speaking at youth centers and schools, and that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more places to speak, more and more clothes to donate. And really, man, just to be honest with you, man, I just keep going and letting it happen as it does. I really obviously I plan some things out, but for the most part it's almost happened on its own.
Nice.
It just like that, it just happens.
I have to ask you, because you did a killer post we talked about the other day. Tell me about your tattoo on your chest. What it meant to you then and what it means now.
Okay, so I have Rockstar tattooed across my chest.
It's a badass tattoo, by the way. It's pretty sick.
Thank you. Yeah. That was actually the first one that I had on my chest. Just said Rockstar real big.
Yeah.
And growing up, I was infatuated with rock stars like Keith Richards, the entire Rolling Stones. Like, I just remember always seeing them like really skinny with long hair and tight jeans on stage, slamming a guitar with, bottles of liquor and girls. And I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Amazing. And actually for a couple years of my life, once I got that tattoo, I used to walk around and always say, I'm a rock star, like acting all crazy. And then I was like, man, this sucks. Once you get in it and you can see it for what it is, it's like, this is not what I thought it was going to be when I put this permanent ink on my chest. And now what a rock star to me is, man, is like somebody who, pays their bills, somebody who, loves others, somebody who treats others the way they want to be treated, somebody who helps people in need. It's not so much about playing guitars and doing drugs and rock and roll even. It's, to me, man, like a rock star is somebody who comes in, changes their life, uses their negative story for a positive message, and just, rock and rolls through it.
Dude, I love that you said that. Again, that's exactly why I named, my platform Recovery Rockstars, because I envision somebody who's now living a life filled with purpose and passion and helping others after they've been through hell and back. I mean, that's the definition of a rock star to me, and you're an absolute rock star, man. So I have to ask you, because, again, to go back to what I said earlier, I get so many direct messages, and a lot of it has to do with heroin. Hey, my daughter, she's in heroin. She's in jail. My son's hooked on heroin. I don't know where to turn. The only thing I know is these stories are giving me hope. If you could speak directly to that parent right now, what would you tell them?
First thing is never, ever, ever lose hope. That's why we named the nonprofit Hope on Deck, because like that, hope is the last thing that we have. Once all the money's gone and everything else is gone, the last thing that you have is hope. Never lose that, no matter how unhopeful the situation may seem. And the second thing is just keep fighting as hard as you can. Get involved. That is the best thing. I always tell parents, if addiction is what is messing up your life right now, then find a way to fight against it. Whether you find a local nonprofit in your area, whether you go to a Nar-Anon meeting and volunteer to make coffee before it, get involved in some aspect of addiction. Because I have a mother who lost her daughter in June. Every time I go speak in the local area, she comes with me and speaks at the detoxes and the rehabs and the schools with me. And she brings her daughter's ashes. And she said, if it wasn't for that, she don't know where she would be right now, because it gets them involved, and it kind of, that is to me like the A1 number one thing that would help.
Love it, man. Thank you so much for that advice. And how can people find you?
So on Facebook, it's Earle Van, and I don't know why my mom decided to put an E at the end of Earle. So if you look it up, it's Earle, and then last name Van, Earle Van. And then also you can look up the page Hope on Deck. And then for the moms out there, we have a page, and it's about 20 mothers that run it. So I don't have nothing to do with it, really. Just moms run it. My mom helps. It's called MOM, MOM, Mothers on a Mission, Fighting Against Addiction. And it's just a network full of mothers. No matter what your addiction story is, they all get on there and they network together and they help each other, and it's beautiful.
That's fantastic. So if somebody wants to volunteer, they could reach out?
Yes, sir. Yep, Earle Van.
Are you traveling at all? Are you coming out west or?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be in California December 21st. I'm speaking at the place that trained me to do interventions. My intervention teacher invited me out to speak at a big Christmas event she's having. So I'll be there in Sacramento on December 21st.
Nice, man. That's awesome. And before we leave, are there any other words of wisdom or anything else you want to share with our audience?
Keep trying. We do recover. It gets greater later. Right now, I know addiction and heroin are two separate things, but what they're doing with this fentanyl now, it is taking lives one after the other. So no matter how hard it seems and no matter how hard it may be, keep trying, keep fighting before this thing ends up taking your life, because that's what it's trying to do.
Do you know much about fentanyl?
Yes.
Can you explain it real quick for somebody who might not know?
Yeah, so fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin, which would mean 1 gram of fentanyl would be equivalent to 50 grams of heroin. So that kind of tells you right there the potency. Most people today that think they're doing heroin are not getting any heroin. Probably over half of the people I take to rehab or to the hospital come up negative for it because it's all fentanyl. It enters the body so fast that some people are overdosing before they're even done the injection. It is a synthetic, so it isn't something that grows like they're making it in labs. Most of it's coming over from China, and it is highly, highly lethal. So don't touch it. If you find some in your kid's room, don't even touch it. Even if you think it might be heroin, do not touch it with your bare hands, because cops are dying from touching the bag and it gets on their skin, and it is so potent that it will absorb through their skin and kill them.
God, that's so frightening.
One last thing about fentanyl, they are putting it in cocaine, they're putting it in marijuana, they're putting it in pills like Xanax and Percocet. It is in almost every drug now. So people are dying from smoking weed. People are dying from doing cocaine, and some people, they might do it like on a Friday and then they don't touch it again for a year. It's more of a fun thing for them where they're not addicted to it. They're dying from just doing a bump of cocaine because it's laced with fentanyl. So it is something it's the biggest health crisis, I believe, in America right now.
Thank you for, again, that insight. And I want to say thank you for being a part of the show, man. I'll say it time and time again, you're an absolute rock star. Having tried to recover for 50 times, growing up with a family of addicts, suffering from PTSD, and seeing where you are now. You're a source of inspiration. You're a light of hope, and keep doing what you're doing. I applaud you and respect you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good, man.
Thanks for being in recovery, rock stars. I guess today's episode is done. In all seriousness, though, Kevin appreciates you being part of this community. RecoveryRockstars.com. Want to email us? Kevin@RecoveryRockstars.com. Facebook, Recovery Rockstars. Instagram us @RecoveryRockstars. Kevin's Wardrobe brought to you by Kevin. Kevin's Transportation brought to you by Kevin. Kevin's cable bill paid by Kevin so he can keep this podcast going. Goodbye.